All right, welcome back to another episode of the Wrenchbench. My name is Mark,
My name's Charles.
and on this week's episode, we want to talk about 3 upgrades for your bike that are going to be for your performance, overall performance, your weight, and just your ride quality of the bike.
Yeah, with any bike out there, you could upgrade practically anything and make the bike better. But we've compiled a list of 3, or actually technically 4 different items that we think are the most efficient upgrades to help your bike out.
Yes, and the first one is definitely a widely talked about subject, which is your wheels. That's a big one a lot of people talk about because it has what is called rotational weight. And there's another weight that we'll talk about right now, which is static weight. So weight that's just not moving. Rotational weight, very easy. It's rotating weight. So it also has an effect with a little bit of your drivetrain because that is rotating as well.
Yeah, so if you think about it, your saddle is not moving relative to the most of your bike. It's just stuck in that one place, whereas your cranks, or most importantly, your wheels, those are obviously rotating. So those are what's considered an active weight, and we'll get into the differences. But they provide some sort of gyroscopic effect that changes the way the bike feels a lot more than like a saddle or your handlebars, even though you're still technically saving weight there. The difference is going to be much more noticeable when you save weight on wheels, and we'll explain why that is.
Yes. So to explain why rotational weight matters is think of it as the bigger the wheel, the more weight that's on the exterior of that wheel or diameter of it is being thrown more. So it just ends up feeling more heavy if there's more weight. So again, you're pedaling. It's not going to be nearly as punchy if the wheel is a little bit heavier. You lighten that weight up on the wheel. On the exterior, primarily those tires have a lot of effect on that. So your wheel does have a good effect on that, but tires is another thing to consider when you're looking at that. So
one thing when we discovered, well, kind of already knew, but discovered more of the specifics of when doing research on this topic that I found super interesting is the 2 times rule. And there's a lot of specifics that we're not going to really dive into just because it's super complicated. If you were to save, let's say, 150 grams on some static weight on your bike, let's say, for example, just a saddle, because it's static, it's not moving at all, it is just stuck there. Obviously, it's a saddle. Or if you saved 150 grams in your tires, like you mentioned, you're saving the same exact weight, just in different places on the bike. You're going to notice that 150 grams way, way more on your tires. So there's a whole lot of math connected to it, but super basically, if you saved 150 grams on your tires versus the saddle, kind of it would be as if you saved 300 grams.
yes and no. It's kind of weird.
Yeah,
this is where I feel like it's a little bit of a gray area where it'll feel like that. I think what the data was saying is that it feels like you're saving 2 times the amount.
Yeah,
which is, of course, it's actually saying that's the max amount that it's going to be is 2 times the amount of whatever you're saving on that weight.
And that's the optimal. Real world, a lot of times it's a lot less, but at the most basic level, it's more efficient in a way to save weight on your wheels or just active weight in general than it would be to save weight statically.
Yeah, so think of a mid-grade wheel that is going to weigh about 1,800 grams to 2,000 grams compared to a high-end wheel that is going to weigh about 1,300 grams to 1,500 grams. So cutting that down by 300 to 700 grams, you could be saving quite a bit of rotational weight in this sense. And that's why a lot of the times when you get on a bike, got better wheels, you always feel like it's much punchier. Typically it's stiffer, so you are getting more power to the wheels. And so overall, yeah, it's going to feel better in many ways.
Yeah, one kind of fun experiment, if you wanted to try it out so you could physically feel the difference, is if you wanted to kind of, if you could somehow fill your wheels with water, you'd be able to feel a huge difference. Obviously, that water is going to slosh around, and there's that. With just that added weight immediately, you're going to notice accelerating and decelerating are those two big changes where saving that weight is going to really, really help. So that's where the active weight really comes into.
Yes. So when you think about it, over a long period of time, that rotational weight will have a good effect on, say, your ride or race. If it's 50 to 100 miles, I really think that will come into play really well, because it's affecting your acceleration over those 50 to 100 miles. If you're every turn you're coming out of, every single time that you're stepping on the pedal, you are accelerating. It should physics should do its part, and then it should make up for X amount of time.
Yeah, exactly. Every single time you accelerate or decelerate, it's easier. So in like a long mountain bike race, for example, every single corner you generally have to slow down at least a little bit. And then once you're through that corner or going through the corner, you're going to want to accelerate back up to speed. With lighter wheels especially, it's going to be easier to get up to that previous speed to accelerate there. And therefore, you're going to be saving a lot of energy, a lot of watts, keeping your heart rate down more, way more, especially throughout the course of that entire race. So that's the major reason why saving weight in your wheels or your cranks, or just saving active weight, is you're still saving the same amount of weight as if you were saving it somewhere else, but it's more efficient. Kind of confusing, but it's really cool how the math works out.
Yes. And keep in mind, this applies to both alloy and carbon. We're not going to get into separations between those two wheels, because there's differences in them, of course. But with weight, just to note, the lighter you go, the more prone you can be to flex in those wheels sometimes, due to just the nature of lightening something up. However, carbon wheels nowadays, they are extremely reliable and stiff, which is great. You're still benefiting a lot from a carbon wheel. And that's really kind of a good base of understanding what the rotational weight is compared to static weight.
Mm-hmm. So wheels, big upgrade. They can get expensive, admittedly, but even just tires. Technically, you're kind of part of the wheel. Depends on how you look at it. Tires, you can get a great set of lightweight tires for $120 for front and rear. And that is going to make a big change, because how the math works out, the farther you get from the center of the hub, the more efficient it is to save the weight there, because the farther that weight has to travel, the more of the gyroscopic effect you're going to get. So you could save weight on like the hub itself, and yeah, it'll help out, obviously. But the farther you get into that diameter of the wheel, the more efficient the weight's going to be. So just pick up a lightweight set of tires, and I can almost guarantee you're going to notice some difference.
Good thing there's a lot of options out there for all of us.
Yep.
So we'll dig into that another time down the road. But the next thing I feel like we want to talk about is really your group set or drivetrain. And that's going to lead to your overall ride quality.
Yep. We discussed weight. Now we kind of want to discuss just overall ride quality. Drivetrains are a big part of it. There's, again, that weight, but then there's also quality of the shifting. There's like your clutch and your derailleur. There's the strength of the chain. Bunch of different, tons of stuff.
Tons of stuff. This applies again for both mountain and road or gravel. I do feel like there's that rotational weight that's in the cranks that matters quite a bit. Cranks have a good amount of weight to them that you can get carbon cranks, but there is a sleeper brand called Garbrook. It does have some really cool cranks that you have, that as another just item that is cool, that carbon isn't always necessarily the way to go. You can get other cranks that are alloy that are really light.
Super light and super stiff.
You've got, look at the drivetrains nowadays, SRAM transmission, quality of that is pretty unbeatable with how well that shifts under load, and even not under load, it just does really, really well. So it makes your ride that much better.
Yeah. There's a bunch of, it changes a bunch of different stuff, but the few different things is the strength, the durability, and then the quality. With, let's say, at the very, very basic level, we've got like a Shimano tourney drivetrain. You got the cheap derailleur, the cheap shifter, the cheap chain, the cheap cassette. I'm not saying Shimano tourney is bad. You kind of get what you pay for. It doesn't really have a clutch built in, so you're going to get a lot of chain slap. And for those of you who don't know, a clutch is that little spring that tightens up on the cage that prevents that chain from slapping around a whole lot. So if you're mountain biking, it's not important on road, but if you're mountain biking, you're going to want a clutch. So find a bike with a derailleur that has a clutch. It's going to be a game changer.
Yes. Comparing drivetrains to the levels of them, you were just kind of doing there with like Shimano Tourney. You've got Shimano 105, and if you compare that to Shimano Ultegra or their Dura Ace, their top of the line ones, I feel like the quality between those are really good, and they're not going to really necessarily change a lot of your ride quality in ways for the amount of money that you're paying for Dura Ace or Ultegra. What you're going to be getting between Dura Ace and Shimano Ultegra is going to be a little bit more weight savings to it. But the downside to those is that those lighter chains, lighter cassettes, cranks, chain rings, and everything, they end up costing a lot more when you're needing to replace those down the road. So this is what's really hard to decide is if Shimano 105, that's a lot less, might be a better group set to get than Ultegra or Dura Ace that wear out quicker and cost a lot more. So it's you're kind of playing with a couple factors of cost to a little bit more performance.
Yeah, and I think this is kind of the funny thing I've noticed is there's a big separation between mountain drivetrains and road drivetrains. Like you mentioned, with road drivetrains, pretty much exclusively, the more money you're going to spend, the more weight savings you're going to get. Because generally, road equipment does not go through nearly as much wear and tear as mountain equipment gets. Whereas on the mountain side of things, the more money you spend, generally, yes, it does get a little bit lighter, but it also it gets way more robust as well. And in some cases, it can even get a little bit heavier if you spend more money, but it's going to get more robust. In the case of transmission, kind of like we kind of mentioned, there's just the previous technology where derailleurs mount to the bike using a derailleur hanger, just a sacrificial piece of metal. We all know what a derailleur hanger is. And then there's this new direct mount technology that came out a few years ago from SRAM. It's called transmission. And transmission is actually heavier than the previous like XX1 from SRAM, where it mounts to the bike using the derailleur hanger. Just because it's heavier doesn't mean it's worse. It's heavier, yes, but it's so much more robust. You can shift under way more load, which is super helpful mountain biking. Like let's say, for example, you're on like a decent grade, 1-2% going uphill, just a little bit, and you go around this corner, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there's just this super steep hill. Obviously, you're going to be crunching those gears, trying to get into like an easier gear so you can spin up that hill. With transmission, that's no issue at all because, yeah, it's heavier, but you can shift pedaling way harder. So overall, it's going to help. So mountain, yes, you can save weight, spending more money, but generally it's going to get more robust versus road. It's not really going to get more robust, but with road, you're just going to save as much weight as possible.
Yep, just a little bit more efficient is what it would come down to.
Yep. So we've got weight. Depends on, obviously, the style of riding. So road, you're just weight savings anywhere you can get. But mountain, you do want to look at weight savings. But let's say, for example, you could save 150 grams on a derailleur. Now, that's not realistic. I'm just throwing out random numbers. Or, like we mentioned, wheels. Save that weight in the wheels, and then instead upgrade your derailleur, make it more robust. Yep. Make it either heavier duty so it can take more hits because you're going to be bashing into rocks no matter how good of a rider you are, and then you're going to be shifting under load. So more efficient to upgrade the durability instead of the weight on like your derailleur, for example.
Yep. And you could even do this. You could do GX transmission derailleur, and then you could get lighter cranks. So you could do the XX cranks, XXSL.
Yep.
So you could mix and match it just a little bit to where you can get robust and then lighter weight cranks. So you're still adding a little bit less weight to the bike.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, there can be some compatibility issues, but for the most part, especially the modern stuff, it is super cross-compatible, especially with SRAM. Generally shouldn't have to worry about it, but just do your research, make sure. If you're going to do some mix and matching, like a lower end derailleur that's just robust, a little bit heavier, and then lighter cranks, because those are active weight. Great idea. Just make sure they're compatible.
For sure.
And then finally, I think we've kind of discussed drivetrains a little bit, weight savings, robustness, just overall shift quality. You can pedal harder. Kind of moving on to our third and technically fourth topics, because me and Mark, not exactly disagreeing, but we have kind of separate ideas of the third upgrade.
Yes.
So I'll let you discuss yours first, Mark.
Yes, the third upgrade and final upgrade. Not the final. There's always upgrades on these bikes, fellas.
Yep.
So
Money
just the one that I think is a great upgrade to do is not necessarily for your bike. It's actually your shoes. So your shoe weight, stiffness, performance of that, comfort. I think that is such a crucial thing to have for being on the bike because that's where a lot of stuff is happening and you're wearing that the whole time. So it's, if you don't have a comfortable shoe, if you don't have a lightweight shoe, I think you can really feel that. And I've tested shoes that are low tier shoes to mid and your highest performing shoe. And I can feel a big difference. I can feel a big difference between the stiffness, the weight, everything to it, because you've got rotational weight that happens with that because it's going along with your cranks.
Keep talking about it.
And
it's important.
It's a super important one to be able to think about. So if you don't have the money to spend on wheels, maybe it's a pair of shoes that are going to be your top of the line carbon shoes to have stiffness that helps with more power to the wheels. There's a lot to dig into, so I won't dig too much into it. Charles, on the other hand,
we're not
disagreeing.
No, we're not disagreeing.
We just have our own.
And we actually do. We have some similarities in the fact that both our last upgrades are contact points. Mark thinks the shoes are super important, and they are. I agree with Mark. Upgrading your shoes can make a huge difference. But me personally, I think upgrading your saddle would help out a little bit more.
I agree.
If you think about it, on a bike, you've got three contact points. You got your grips, you got your pedals / shoes, and then you got your saddle. And I think personally, I've ridden more uncomfortable saddles than I've ridden more uncomfortable shoes. So admittedly, the shoes are considered active weight. So saving weight there is going to be more efficient than if you were to save weight with the saddle. But I think you're almost exclusively in contact with your saddle. You're climbing, you're descending. A lot of times you're making contact with your saddle. So you can save a lot of weight on saddles, actually. Like, there's a big difference between like mid-end saddles that are still like they're decent, and then high-end saddles you can actually still save quite a bit of weight. But then that major thing is comfort, especially if you're training and you're on the bike 10, 15 hours a week, which is not unreasonable at all. You want a comfortable saddle. So I think, in my personal opinion, now we want to hear what you guys think too. What do you think your best upgrade would be, or most efficient upgrade would be? I think it's the saddle, because a more comfortable saddle is going to help you out way, way more than shoes that fit a little bit better. But, Mark?
But I've had shoes that don't feel good and constant pressure on your feet in ways where you don't want to ride. And same goes for the saddle. You can feel super uncomfortable, and I've had that. And I've gone through a couple saddles, and I found what works for me, and I totally agree. So just kind of like what Charles was saying, what would you choose if it were between, say, the saddle or shoes? Or do you have a different thing that you're like, I don't care about those things? I would choose handlebars. I would choose a carbon bar set to help take away a little bit of the vibrations. I don't know.
Yeah.
There's so many upgrades out there for your bikes that you can do. And
the only right option is to upgrade both shoes and a saddle.
Just go all in and upgrade everything on your bike, guys.
Yeah.
Just
Except the brakes. Brakes slow you down. You don't want good brakes.
Yeah. Just delete the brakes completely off of the bike.
Boom. Weight savings, and you go faster.
There you go. So lots of cool things to think about when you're upgrading your bike. Of course, it's going to come down to money and who knows what. There's other things definitely that you're looking into. So we definitely would love to hear from you guys about what upgrades you recommend. Mm-hmm. So for sure, leave a comment on what you guys recommend most.
All right. Well, I think that just about wraps this episode up. Just a quick recap. Talked about wheels, we talked about drivetrains, and we talked about contact points. We'll just combine our two contact points: grips, saddles, shoes, and pedals, all into one clump. So those are what we think are the most efficient upgrades for your bike. But let us know what you think.
Perfect.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.